Welcome, everyone, as you come on. We got a whole host of people coming on to the meeting, and it's good to have you. We'll get started here in just about half a minute. Just after we get everybody on and we really, truly hit the top of the hour. So, see a lot of familiar faces out there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good way to meet.
Good to see Fernando, one of our presenters. So glad you made it.
Glad to be here.
You don't have to whisper.
Oh.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour, 10 Central. I want to welcome everybody. I'm Joe Gatlin, and this is the second in our Nurturing Community series, a call to community in unsettled times. And I want to thank again the good people of Eden Community and Abilene for coming up with this great idea and initiating it. We had hoped to host a live in-person in the flesh meeting in Abilene and for Nurturing Community, and of course had to cancel that, and it seems let me mention just a few things about Zoom etiquette. I'm guessing almost everybody on the phone is by now a Zoom expert. If you're anything like us, we're having half of Zoom meetings here in Waco. But if you're not talking, if you would please mute yourself. So that'll help eliminate some background noise. What may sound to you like just ambient noise in the background may come out as something very distracting to everybody else. And then if you are ready to speak, want to speak, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just try to jump in, but you'll need to unmute yourself, probably in the lower left-hand corner, or press the space bar. So something just happened. Somebody is, Ruth, you're sharing screen. If you could figure out how to undo that. So maybe Ruth will be able to get that off of here in a minute. Just some of our notes for the session. Well, let me also mention we're going to be recording this session, and it will go up on our website, the Nurturing Communities website, soon. Kent, anything else on etiquette that you want to mention?
I think that pretty well covers it, Joe.
Let me just ask, can anybody provide guidance to Ruth real quick how to exit? Oh, there we go. Very good. Okay. So today we're going to hear some very personal reflection from members of Hope Fellowship about their experience in one of the great paradoxes of the gospel, which is how we're called to discipleship that is very costly, but in that we receive very bountiful gifts. We'll go into breakout groups and we'll do some personal sharing there. And at the end, we'll come back all together and have some time for Q&A or just further conversation with all the participants in the remaining time. And we're gonna, at an hour, we'll note that we've really completed our hour together, but if there's still energy and time for talking more, those that want to stay will stick around for another half hour to have some more conversation. So first, let me just share a brief thumbnail sketch of Hope Fellowship. Want to acknowledge there's some other Hope Fellowship people on the call, other than Fernando, Ruth, Nancy, and myself. We're an urban community in Waco, Texas. We'll later this year be celebrating our 26th anniversary as a community. We're about 70 people, which includes a whole host of children, The great majority of us live within walking distance of each other. Just as an example, Lonnie's on the screen, who lives right upstairs from Nancy and me. Fernando and his family live across the alley from us, and Ruth and her family live 2 doors down. So we see each other practically every day. We have a very
No grites, por favor.
we have a very thick life together in encouragement and discipleship, discernment about life's issues as we try to understand God's calling on us, sharing childcare and daily fellowship. We're an all-volunteer group with no paid staff. We have individual ownership of our assets of homes and cars if we do own homes. But we do have a lot of financial sharing that goes on in various ways, and we have a commitment that no one in the community will be in need. We're also bilingual. We do our worship in both Spanish and English, and most of our meetings Spanish and English too. Probably a good portion of the community is bilingual to some degree, and some people have their first language is Spanish. Some people, their first language is English. We're also affiliated with the Mennonites, as well as Shalom Mission Communities, and also the Nurturing Communities Network. So let me say the paradox of the cost and the blessings of discipleship. It's articulated well in 2 passages from Luke, which we sent out with the invite on this. And I'll just read those. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you intending to build a tower does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? There is no one who has left house or wife or husband or brothers or sisters or parents or children for the sake of the kingdom of God who will not get back very much more in this age and in the age to come, eternal life. There's nothing more tangible in the cost of discipleship than laying down our lives for our brothers and sisters. So before we hear from Hope Fellowship, we're going to break into groups. Kent is going to randomly just push us out into groups of 3, and just want to have 5 minutes together to, here's the questions. For those of you who are veterans of community, and we've got a lot of those on the line, I know, just share a brief reflection on what are the costs and what are the blessings for you and community. For those who may not be in community, who are seeking community, if you're with us, just share something that you think may seem intimidating or may make you hesitate, or you wonder about the cost of community. Of course, take a minute or 2 to just introduce each other. We're going to come back, and Kent will set the timer in 5 minutes, so we'll just, there's no negotiating that. Once he sets it, we'll just come back at that point. So Kent, go ahead and push us out into the groups, if you would, please. We'll talk about that. We're going to hear from Hope Fellowship people. In Hope Fellowship, the membership process usually takes several years for people to complete it. And we've discovered that a very rich and provocative question, as somebody actually goes through the formalization of that at our final meeting with them, is we ask, what is this costing you? To be very specific and personal about a sense of what are you giving up to be part of this community? I found it to be such a rich question that we started, for those of us that have been around decades, to share that too and reflect on that question with each other. So we're going to hear from Nancy and Ruth Boardman Alexander and Fernando Arroyo and myself, all briefly are going to just share a little bit about this. It's a very personal experience. We don't mean in any way to say that our experience is normative. I've always appreciated looking in Luke 18, seeing the rich ruler is told when he asks what must he do is give up everything and sell it to the poor. And a few verses later, Zacchaeus comes in with his own plan as to what he's going to do and what that cost involves, which is somewhat different. So Nancy will start, and then Nancy, you'll turn it over to Ruth, and Ruth will turn it to Fernando, and Fernando back to me.
Okay. Well, good morning, all. And in order to be brief, I'm going to be looking at my notes a bit so I don't digress. But it's so good to be with everyone this morning. I guess in my experience, after the disbanding of a previous church community here in our neighborhood, Joe and I began attending a more standard Presbyterian church in town. Our daughters at that time were 8 and 12, and we thought it important to find somewhere that had kids their ages and programming that they would be interested in. At the same time, though, we were engaging Virgil Vogt from Riva Place Fellowship in Evanston, Illinois, a long-standing urban Christian community, seeking his counsel as well as that of Hilda Carper's. They encouraged us to see our then commonplace household as both community and church. As we followed their lead and discerned God's will and calling, we began to gather in our home with a handful of neighbors. The situation, though, was that there were no children, let alone youth. So, though there was much excitement about this new calling, it was very clear that there was a cost for our daughters, and I, as their mom, for me too, in that there were no peers for them and no programming geared for them. They, in fact, later became Sunday school teachers for the much younger children that came along. Again, there was a lot of energy in this new kingdom effort, and it required a lot of focus and commitment on the part of our household. There was cleaning that went on before and after each gathering, set up, and then putting things back at the end, as well as many of our gatherings involved meals. In some measure, this investment of time and energy meant that we couldn't at the same time invest in other friendships outside of our fellowship, perhaps with folks who would have been more Joe's and my peers. The fact that we all had our other paying jobs as well meant that in our extra time, our fellowship became our primary focus in our lives. I personally turned down several attempts by my superiors to get me to take on more responsibility and higher paid positions as a teacher or administrator. But I must say that the cost, for the most part, hasn't felt like cost, because in God's upside down way, the blessings have always been around. Though our daughters didn't have peers for a very long time, they grew up in that period of their lives surrounded by adults younger than their parents who were living out genuine faith. There is no doubt of the positive impact that that had on them. They learned at an early age the joy and importance of serving. The fruit is borne out now in their lives today. Hope Fellowship is now almost 26 years old, as you heard, and of our 70 or so brothers and sisters, probably 80 to 85% live in the neighborhood in easy walking distance of each other. What that means is that our lives are often crossing paths far beyond our meetings. In this time of COVID-19, even as we get out to walk and exercise, keeping our physical distance, we see each other, we wave, we check in. Along with the rest of our neighbors, it is an incredible blessing to live in a place where you're known and you know. The sense of belonging brings healing and peace. The other side of the coin of effort and focus is that our church and community has offered me and many others many wonderful opportunities to practice hospitality. Over the years, my life has been enriched by all the folks that have shared our table and our lives. As a third culture person myself, it has brought a whole lot of wellness and integrity to my life. As I share food with folks from different cultures, speaking Spanish and English back and forth. It has been my joy to provide a place where folks who were strangers could get to know each other and become friends. It truly has enlivened my spirit. So working alongside my brothers and sisters as well as other neighbors has often stretched me beyond my comfort zone, but allowing me to experience God's grace and helping me discover and fine-tune the gifts that Christ has given me for the common good. In summary, there is no other life I would rather be living. Ruth?
All right, even though I accidentally screen shared, sorry about that, you guys. I do know how to do the mute and unmute. I have my timer on. I just started it, so I'm going to not go over, I hope. My husband and I were in Nicaragua with Mennonite Center Committee, and as we were finishing up that time, and in 1996, we were exploring where we would go next. And we had a connection with Joe and Nancy through Habitat for Humanity. And so we joined actually what was Hope Community at the time. There was a shared First Common household living arrangement where the couple that helped start Hope Community and Hope Fellowship had been living. And so we were there, so we've been there ever since. There wasn't a membership process back then, and we were a much smaller group meeting together in our living room, like Nancy shared. So as I was thinking, I think like Nancy too, I was thinking a lot about the blessings and benefits. I hope the lawnmower next door isn't too loud here. And I realized even as we were meeting here that probably it's because if we're still in community, it is because the blessings are greater than the cost. We wouldn't still be participating if we weren't being overwhelmed with blessings. But I was glad in preparing for this that Nancy reminded me. I had told Joe one time that time was the biggest cost, and I think it is. I think I have a lot of energy, but time is something that I think about a lot, how I'm going to fit everything in. And so just like Nancy shared, the time that I might have spent on other things or but other relationships outside of the church, but overall it's been a blessing. The other thing that about 3.5 years ago, I became part of the pastoral team. And that's probably the thing that stretched me the most as far as emotional cost and just discomfort or uncomfortableness doing things that I don't feel very good at. And so that was a long process of discernment. And I initially was quite surprised, but it's been a chance to trust God in deeper ways because I can see my weaknesses when I take on things that I haven't done in the past. And so, and I've also carried some emotional anxiety about things. But again, it's made me deepen my trust in God because it really isn't about what I can do, but what God is doing through us. And so as far as blessings, I think the greatest blessing, or one of the greatest blessings, in addition to just the deepening of my trust in God, is being able to be loved by and love such wonderful people. And sometimes I can't even believe that I have so many people that support and care and love me so well and allow me to do the same. I think I know so many incredible people, and I've learned to see their gifts. And I've been so blessed. Our community has been blessed by just the variety of gifts that people have, and the care for one another's real well-being. We have an adult daughter, who has a lot of emotional and cognitive struggles, and we could not have gotten her to the point of living on her own without the support of all the people, I don't feel like my husband and I have carried the decision making and the discernment. It's very much been a chance to be loved very, very deeply by our community. So God's provision, the blessing of gifts, the loving and being loved are huge blessings that I experience. Bam! I have 47 seconds left. I think I'm finished.
Fernando?
Okay, I'm next. Hey everyone, my name is Fernando Arroyo. I'm here at Hope Fellowship. I live behind Joe and Nancy, and catty corner to Ruth, and behind Lonnie too. I'm from Mexico, and came when I was about 5-6 years old, and always felt, some of you will understand some of this term, but like the whole third culture kid, where am I from, who am I, what's my history, do I really have a home, all of that stuff has been a lifelong struggle. My mom one day confronted me when I was, I was about 20 years old or so, 19 years old, 20 years old, and I decided to not pursue medical school. I struggled really hard to try to even get into college, and she said, why in the world are you choosing not to continue in medical school and instead working for a nonprofit that works with kids and homeless, not making anything, living like a homeless person yourself? I came here because I wanted us to progress, not regress, and that hurt me a lot. So I was struggling with that and what God was calling me to. Made a huge impact, and that was, for me, the cost of wanting to stay connected to my roots, to my mom's ambition, the sacrifices that she made to migrate, to start a new life, to not have a place that we called our own, hopping around from friend to friend, family member to family member's home, growing up with very little, and still feeling a call to serve others, and a call to recognize that there's more to the gospel than just where we're gonna go when we die. It has to be more. I couldn't reconcile that. I was at Baylor University, a lot of rich kids, and predominantly white for Anglo, and I could not reconcile the struggles that the kids that I was working with were experiencing, and the wealth and disregard for the kids that I was working with by the students and the professors at the university. I could not reconcile where the good news was in the gospel. I didn't know where it was. In my efforts to learn more about the good news of the gospel, I got involved in a number of things and discovered Anabaptism, discovered the Peace Church, and discovered what God was doing through other communities who felt a similar call that there has to be some good news to the gospel, or it's no gospel. And right now, I met Joe, and I met Barbara Bridgewater, and I met Ruth, and a few others. And now for a little over a decade now, I've been on the pastoral team and participating in Hope Fellowship. My other job right now is in healthcare. I'm a healthcare administrator now. So I'm working, my hours went up instead of down with this coronavirus thing. I'll tell you more about the coronavirus, but it's about as long as a novel, so I'm just not going to share more about that. The cost of the community is great. It means that that my life is not my own, but the blessings is this, in that giving it up, I found it. And I'm grateful for my brothers and sisters, for Nancy, for Ruth, for Joe, for everybody else, and even you all, for even though I may not know a lot of you, and even though the cost of sometimes I'm in a lot of contexts and situations where the proportion of people of color and white people was really off. Much like on this call, I mean, that's another cost to me. It really is. I immediately recognized, and it's on the top of my mind, who's on the call, who's in a room, what's the conversation, is anything about anything, that may connect with who I've been and who I am and where I come from. And that's just immediate for me. But it also means that God is calling all the nations to God's self. And I get to be a part of that. And I'm always discovering every day how that is being embodied in community. Thank you.
Thanks, Fernando. I'll personally mention just a few things. One is cost I've counted through the years that seemed costly at first. One was money. Many decisions Nancy and I have made through the years. We were never able, in hearing the call of Jesus, excuse me, to focus on saving money. So we didn't save money for children's college education. We didn't save money to buy a house. We didn't save money for what other people call retirement. And at this point, we live in a huge old house that's wonderful, where we've been able to live with other people in community and practice hospitality when we aren't in a pandemic. Our daughters were able to go to the college of their choice and ended up with no debt after their undergraduate degrees. And we're now what we call jubilated, not retired, where we just have the great gift of getting up daily and understanding what God wants us to do. Another was career. I worked over 30 years for Habitat International. In the late 80s and early 90s, Millard Fuller, the founder of Habitat, asked me several times to move to Americas, where Habitat's headquarters were, to take on positions of national and actually global responsibility. And I always replied no, because I was just clear that it seemed clear that we should be here in Waco and pursuing the call of community and laying down our lives for brothers and sisters. There's great blessing in that. I just have to say now to say the blessing look as to what others have shared, the family, the friends, the brothers and sisters on a daily basis at this point in our life. Another is actually family. There were times that there was really some disapproval, some sense of misgiving, some sense of betrayal from my parents as we pursued our life and calling in community, which seemed like an alien lifestyle to our parents at times. We've been blessed wonderfully the last 15 years of our parents' lives. We were able to care for them personally, be with each one of them, all four of them as they passed away, personally caring in our home for several of them. What a wonderful blessing that God did provide back to us. And lastly, I'll just mention is my own vision of community. Dietrich Bonhoeffer stated that very well in his little book, The Cost of Discipleship, about how we have to, in pursuing community, give up our own vision of what we think is the perfect community in Jesus Christ. And that's a cost. I mean, everybody that lasts in community, it seems like, really discovers the truth of those words, that the communities that are created as people come to this or belong to Christ. They belong to Jesus. They're not our choice or what we do. And I mean, Hope Fellowship is not what I would have fashioned or created, and praise the Lord, I would say on that. So we're gonna move back into our groups for 5 more minutes. And basically it's just a reprise of the first time in our groups. You know, those of you, and there are many with tremendous experience in living in community on these calls, or others of you that are at different places, but just to share reflection, fears, blessings, what you've experienced in considering the cost of living in intentional community. So Kent, if you'd put us back and set the timer for 5 minutes, that'd be great. we're all back, and now it's really just going to be an open mic time for people may have questions about Hope Fellowship or from the particular individuals that shared. You may have some response to the overall theme that you want to share. Maybe you want to share something you heard in your small group that was really particularly meaningful or insightful. So I'm just going to open it up. You'll need to unmute yourself to talk, and hopefully we got a big group, but hopefully we'll manage this okay without going to the hands up sort of thing. So speak up, whoever is feeling led here. And introduce yourself as you do so.
One thing I thought about quite a bit, thinking about it myself and maybe hearing a little bit is just like me as an individual, like your strengths, your blessings are also the things that are hard. And when I was thinking about community, thinking about like the different strengths of or blessings in community, it also struck me that some of those things are also the hard things and part of the cost, whether it's working through relationships and the work that goes into that as a cost, but then the blessing that comes with that too, or the commitment that we make to each other as a cost and a blessing.
Very, very good, John. And I think it's always great for us in community to share that in very specific ways, as we realize, well, yeah, here's how I'm having to lay something down to follow Jesus. But here is the corresponding blessing that really, really goes with that, because that is part of the truth of the gospel. So Ian is pointing out you could also use the chat feature to comment or ask questions too. And Ian, if you would monitor that for us, I would appreciate it.
Okay. I've been thinking about something about as we think about steps towards opening up a little bit from our extremes, physical distancing, how we who live in intentional Christian community are responsible to so many more people. As I go out to do shopping, I think about the 19 people that I live with, and I'm not just responsible for keeping my own health, but their health. So.
Thanks, Heidi. Can you just tell us your name and where you're from too? That would be helpful. Is everybody?
I live in Heredia, Costa Rica, where I live in Casa Dobe, which is an intentional Christian community founded about 9 years ago.
Okay, great.
I'm Megan. I'm from Reba. I want to say thank you to Hope Fellowship, and Nancy, thank you for telling more of your and Joe's story about the cost of community and the challenges of growing up with kids in community. I also live in an intentional Christian household with 11 people. Yeah, we have 11. And I think the challenge and the blessing is knowing yourself and learning what energies you have, and praying to God to give you more energy for things you need to do. And I'm grateful I'm not alone during this COVID-19 virus, and that no one has it. But God's giving me strength and grace to do more things that I normally don't do, and being patient with myself and finding joy. And communities work, households work, and there's joys and blessings, and think of more blessings than they come. I think for me, thinking about more of the blessings than the sacrifices is good. So, thank you. Peace out, all.
Thanks, Megan. Tell everybody how many people live in your household, the clearing.
Oh, I thought 11 people, age range 90 to 30. How old's Carl? 33, 31. Ages 60, 70, 2 90-year-olds. Yeah, Peggy's 90. Different health conditions going on in our house. God's good. Anything else?
No, thanks. Thanks, Megan.
Fernando from Hope Fellowship shared a prayer request about his work with Waco Family Health Center, serving underinsured, and indigent populations. Pray for the poor and people of color who will be disproportionately negatively impacted by both the economy downturn and the virus spread. So thanks, Fernando, for that. And if you'd like, feel free to use the chat feature to say more about where you come from. The chat feature will be recorded, I think, also as a separate file, and might be accessible later on.
Great.
I had a question. My name is Daniel. I'm not currently part of a community. I live in the Bay Area, California, by Oakland. And I just had a question for those who are in community. To what degree natural affinity among people plays a role in the formation or continuation of a community? Either not at all or 100%, but I imagine it's somewhere in between. So I'm curious if anyone has thoughts on that.
Who would like to respond to that?
This is Bryn Dubé. I am a member of Quintanilla Farm, which is an extremely diverse community. We function as a house church, but all the members also belong to a church in town. So we have Baptist, African American, Methodist Episcopalians, we have Catholic, we have Presbyterian, we have Mennonite, we have Quakers. So one of the most beautiful things about living in Koinonia is I think it really exemplifies how people of different backgrounds, different ages, different races, different faiths can come together in unity to welcome others to the table. So I think one of our strengths is that we're not like-minded, but we can work through our differences and be guided by love and tremendous love and respect and caring. So it does work, the different ages, the different races, the different socioeconomic backgrounds, and on and on. I know many people listening to this know that. But hello from Koinonia, and we started in 1942, and we're still here, so please keep praying for us.
Daniel, I would just add to what Bryn so well put. My observation and my own experience has seen that I think maybe at the beginning, some communities attract like-minded people. But my experience has also been that over the years, if a community is really listening to God, it will quickly not be just all like-minded. And so sometimes there's a time of shift and it not being real comfortable as those who are chummy chum friends all of a sudden need to integrate folks that, you know, are their brothers and sisters, but are not exactly just like them. And I think that's an ongoing challenge for a lot of our communities. It cycles back around. It doesn't just happen once. and it's something we do need to pay attention to. So thank you for asking that question.
Mhm.
I would also say that, oh, go ahead.
I think also a factor to consider is having a purpose greater than yourselves. And a lot of times, I'm not going to say that just automatically smooths over rough patches and relationship difficulties and that, because that's always going to be. But if you have that greater purpose, then you find some common ground there. So that's all I had to say.
Thanks. And Lida, where are you from?
Oh, sorry about that. I'm from Jesus People USA, an urban community, income sharing. I've been there for 40 some years and currently work at our homeless shelter.
Thanks. And Mike, in Indianapolis, you were trying to respond too.
I was just going to say, it's just easy to miss the kind of inherent ethnocentrism that we all have. And so we tend to see everything through the lens of the ethnic, racial backgrounds that we have. And so we gravitate towards one another, and we can say that it's a common mind or a common pursuit, but even that's tempered by those ethnocentric kinds of backgrounds that we have, which explains why there's plenty of people out there who care deeply about community and the kingdom of God, and yet the 60 plus of us on this call, there's no racial diversity.
Thanks, Mike. I'll mention something that Laura shared in our breakout group, which is, I think often the call to community and the call to follow Jesus is to end up someplace that is not our choice of place either. I mean, we already talked about how we might not choose the people who God gives us as sisters and brothers, but Laura was just saying she grew up in the verdant hills of Northwest Arkansas, and now she lives in the dry, baked land of Abilene, Texas, and sometimes has to ask why, Lord. And so I think, that is, we're not necessarily going to be called to our ideal geography either. So probably others on the phone have that same experience.
Joe, I guess as long as we have brothers and sisters that are in those ideal places that we can visit, right?
That's another advantage, true, right? Yeah. We're coming up on the hour, and we will stick around for those that want to talk more. I'm sure there's a lot to share here if people want to share. Let me mention also that we did this 2 weeks ago. Sent out the list of those who participated with email addresses so folks could correspond with each other if they want to more. And I think we'll do that this time. So if you do not want to have your name on that list, then let us know. And how do we, Laura, remind me, do they send that email to you, or just how do they respond to that if
Yeah, so, excuse me, that was a question that came up toward the end of the first workshop, and so we basically just asked everybody who was participating in that one to let me know if they did not want their information shared. But since then, I added a question to the registration form so that people have indicated one way or another. And I did circulate that list last night. I think there have been maybe 3 additional people sign up just this morning, and we can get their info out as well soon. One point on that is that once you have signed up, you do not necessarily need to continue signing up for additional subsequent workshops. You'll just be included in the list. If you'd like to opt out, feel free to respond and let me know, and I'll take you off the list.
Okay. And in 2 weeks, we're going to hear from Inglewood Christian Church in Indianapolis, which is yet another type of community. And then in 4 weeks from the Bruderhof, I think, is what we'll be doing in this series. But, those that want to drop off, of course, you're free to drop off at any point. But go ahead, and for any who would like to stick around, we'll be glad to continue our conversation.
I have a quick question. 2 weeks ago, are these gonna, if you wanna, like, it was good information, but how about if you want to review that information so we can get more information from what we talked about 2 weeks ago? Is there somewhere where you can maybe eventually get that online?
Well,
You know what I'm saying? I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, the session itself is recorded and will be available on the Nurturing Communities Network website. And also there's a lot of other resources and ways to connect on the Nurturing Communities Network site. So you can start there. I think Nancy and I and Elizabeth Turman, who's also on the call and provide leadership for that group, would be glad to help you identify other folks within the network. I mean, that's often the role we're playing. Somebody will ask a question, say, I'm looking for this or that, and we'll do our best to point them not necessarily to ourselves, but to somebody else in this network who may well be on this call, but who has had some experience there.
I just want to, I'm just didn't get all of what Eden Community, all the what they're about, and I'll look on the website, and then if I have more questions, I'll email you guys. Thank you for answering my question.
Other questions, responses, something you heard?
Sorry.
Quick response, Megan. I believe that the Eden video is already up on the website, so you can go there and find that now.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, my name is Jessica. I'm in Fresno, California, so Central California. I'm currently in a group of maybe 15 adults or so who are like actively discerning community. And there's several of us on this call, so thanks for having us with you. I think if it's okay, I'd love to like press that question a little bit more when we were talking about multi-ethnicity and talking about, I love that Fernando raised the question of like, okay, so who's even in the room right now? And having that lens is super important. I really loved, Fernando, when you said that, I think you said this kind of in passing, that the idea that like God is calling all cultures to God's self, God is calling all people to God's self. And I wonder if you all have found that like, particularly for European Americans or white people who are coming from a more individualistic culture, that the call to community is almost this like culturally contextual challenge. And maybe that's why there is a certain ethnic makeup that happens in Christian communities. So I've been kind of chewing on that for a while, and it's a source of tension for me. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to tease out in that. Obviously, there would be this whole other call, but part of it is this: the whole feel about community and connectedness and cohesion and all that stuff. Those things were things for survival for people of color who have been colonized, and so I don't have that. I didn't have that missing. You know, I wasn't looking for connectedness because I was lonely or because I didn't have family. If anything, like that whole chain migration thing happened in my case, and I was part of that. And so that's not what I was looking for Christian community. I think for a lot of Anglos, there is this connection and stuff, and I think that disconnect has been an externality or an unintended consequence of having dominance in the culture. Is that you have free reign to have what you want without having to, be dependent upon one another so tightly, so intimately, because there has been a threat to existence, right? And so it's complicated. And for me, it's thinking beyond just my culture and thinking what is what is God doing in the world over time, through time, from the past to the present to the future, and what boundaries does love have among the people? And that for me was a strong call. That for me was the call. So there's lots of stratified layers to this conversation and lots of stuff to disentangle. So I don't think it's just people of color, not people of color thing. I think the broader call is God calling all people to the mountain, not just sending a Moses up there to translate and interpret what God is calling us to, right? And God calls all the people to the mountain. But people said, no, we're too afraid. You go, Moses, you go on our behalf. And Moses was like, all right, fine, I'll go. And so there was already this disconnect that we placed upon ourselves. There's good things and there's bad things about culture, no matter whether you're from a dominant culture or the oppressed culture or colonized or remnants of the colonization culture. There's good and there's bad. I don't think there's actually anything bad, but I do think that there's better and not as good. But anyway, it's a multifaceted thing, and it's not clear cut even for me and my family. And culturally, my family and my connections and my story and my history is not enough. Much like a partner in real life is not enough, whether it's a friendship or a marriage. That person is not the end all be all of being a whole person. God is calling us all to be whole with God.
Well said, Fernando. One story from Hope Fellowship that I think helps illustrate some of that. Our first 8 to 9 years, we had a common treasury household that was really at the center of Hope Fellowship. We called it Hope Community. And we'd reached a point where we thought, well, it really shouldn't be the center, but because of the intensity of that experience, it probably still was. And we also realized that with our own sense of calling and the makeup of our neighborhood with many immigrants and first-generation immigrants, some of them from Latin America, from Mexico and so forth, we realized those are folks that are primarily looking for, they've come to the U.S. to if they're settling here, to make their stake, and owning property was maybe an important sort of step for them in that, and that actually our common treasury was in that way countercultural to what we were hearing as Jesus's call. We were sort of running out of steam, actually, with some personal transitions too that were in place with that group. And it was a loss for some of us, but it just really seemed like it was better to try to really find forms that would have sharing and the mutual aid, and which was a very rich tradition of people sharing with each other and extended families coming in from Latin America. So it was just, we tried to be sort of adaptive in that as to how the Lord is leading us at particular points.
I would also add, Jessica, right now on the call, we have people representing community in Costa Rica and in Saltillo, Mexico. And we need to get back together and figure out how do we bring people, not just leaders who can speak English, but the others in these communities to join us. Are we going to have some workshops like this that are just in Spanish, or some workshops that are bilingual, whatever? But we have a very specific possibility right here, right now, and my real sense and longing is that I know in my own life, I have been able to understand God more and in deeper ways because of brothers and sisters from other cultures and other places. So I yearn for that myself.
I don't have nearly as much wisdom or experience to add, but just as a recently started community of all 20-somethings, white young adults in a predominantly Latin American community. It's been interesting to think about how our families react to this idea of people intentionally living together, and our church communities. They're generally supportive, but it's you tell coworkers and they're like, "Is this a cult? Like what's going on here?" But to our neighbors, as people have mentioned, that it's they live multi-generationally. They have full houses, and there's a lot of and other people in our community where in actually our neighborhood who, a bunch of people living in a house together is no big deal. So different things stand out to different people in terms of what's strange about the decisions that we've made. It's just been an interesting thing to walk through.
And David, where are you from?
Oh yeah, my apologies. I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the East Phillips neighborhood, which is about 40% from Latin backgrounds, and then 20% on a few other different ethnicities.
Anybody else? Well, it's been great to be with each other more today, and the spirit of networking. Hope people will continue to reach out to each other and make connections. There's a wealth of experience here on this phone call with so many people from different communities, and God is always creating something new. That seems to be the work of the Holy Spirit. So special blessings on those that are working at creating a new community, and we want to pray for you and hear from you. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time, and I hope you'll rejoin us in a couple of weeks as we hear from Inglewood Christian. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Bye.
Gracias, hasta luego.
Gracias.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.